Imagine spending more than $10 billion to build an airport and then watching it slowly sink into the ocean. It sounds like the plot of a disaster movie. But this is real. Just off the coast of Osaka, Japan built one of the most ambitious engineering projects in human history, an entire international airport floating on an artificial island in the middle of the sea. At first, the project was celebrated as a miracle of modern engineering. It solved problems that seemed impossible. It created land where no land existed, and it became a symbol of Japan's technological power. But there was one problem. The airport started sinking almost immediately. Today, engineers are still fighting a battle against nature that began the day construction started. The question is, why would Japan build a massive airport in the ocean knowing the risks? And how has it managed to survive for more than 3 decades? The answer reveals one of the most incredible engineering stories ever told. By the 1960s, Osaka had become one of Japan's economic powerhouses. Factories were booming, businesses were expanding, international trade was exploding, and millions of people were moving into the region. The city's main airport was struggling to keep up. Aircraft traffic increased every year. Flights were delayed. Expansion options were limited. But the biggest problem wasn't space, it was noise. Jets flew directly over residential neighborhoods, creating constant complaints from residents. Communities protested, lawsuits followed, political pressure mounted. Authorities knew they needed a new airport. The obvious solution was to build one farther away from the city. But there was a problem. Japan is a mountainous country, with very little flat land available for massive infrastructure projects. Around Osaka, suitable land was scarce, expensive, and densely populated. Every possible location created new challenges. Then, engineers proposed something that sounded almost impossible. What if they built the airport in the ocean? At first, the idea seemed crazy. Building an airport offshore had never been attempted on this scale. The cost would be enormous. The engineering challenges were overwhelming. But the more officials studied the proposal, the more attractive it became. No residents would complain about aircraft noise. The airport could operate 24 hours a day, and it would provide unlimited space for future expansion. Eventually, Japan approved the plan. What happened next would become one of the largest construction projects on Earth. Construction officially began in 1987. The chosen location sat several kilometers offshore in Osaka Bay. The first challenge was simple to describe, but incredibly difficult to achieve. They needed to create an island where none existed. Massive seawalls were built around the future site. These barriers would eventually contain millions of tons of fill material. Then came the earth-moving operation. Entire mountains were excavated. Quarries operated around the clock. Ships transported enormous quantities of rock and soil into the bay. Day after day, month after month, workers dumped material into the ocean. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of millions of cubic meters of fill were used. The seabed slowly disappeared beneath an artificial landscape. From above, it looked like a new piece of Japan was emerging from the sea. But beneath the surface, a much bigger problem was waiting. The seabed under Osaka Bay wasn't solid rock. It was made largely of soft marine clay, and that clay would threaten the entire project. The ground beneath the island behaved almost like a sponge. When enormous weight was added on top, the clay compressed. Engineers knew sinking would occur. The challenge was predicting how much. To reduce the risk, they developed an innovative solution. More than 1 million vertical sand drains were installed deep into the seabed. These drains allowed trapped water to escape from the clay, helping the ground compress faster before the airport opened. It was one of the largest ground stabilization projects ever attempted. The terminal building required even more innovation. The airport's main terminal, designed by renowned architect Renzo Piano, would become one of the longest airport terminals in the world. But because the island would continue settling, engineers created adjustable support columns. These supports could be raised over time as the ground sank. It was a remarkable idea. The airport was essentially designed to adapt to movement. For a while, everything seemed under control. Then, the airport opened, and reality arrived. In September 1994, Kansai International Airport officially welcomed its first passengers. The world was impressed. The airport looked futuristic. The engineering achievements were extraordinary. International media praised the project. Japan appeared to have accomplished the impossible. But shortly after opening, engineers noticed something alarming. The island was sinking faster than expected. Much faster. Original forecasts had underestimated how much the clay beneath the island would compress. Every year, the airport moved lower. Runways dropped, aprons settled. Infrastructure slowly descended towards sea level. The numbers became impossible to ignore. Billions of dollars were sitting on land that refused to stop sinking. Some critics began calling the project a disaster. Others wondered if the airport might eventually become unusable. But abandoning the facility wasn't an option. Instead, engineers launched one of the longest-running infrastructure rescue efforts ever undertaken. The fight against sinking became a permanent part of airport operations. Teams continuously monitored settlement rates. Thousands of sensors tracked movement across the island. Engineers analyzed data constantly. Whenever certain areas dropped too much, adjustments were made. The seawall surrounding the island became a particular focus. As the island settled, seawalls had to be raised repeatedly to maintain protection from the ocean. Special hydraulic systems allowed structural supports beneath parts of the airport to be adjusted. Some columns were literally lifted to compensate for ground movement. It was like maintaining a giant machine that never stopped changing shape. And despite the challenges, the strategy worked. The airport remained operational. Passengers rarely noticed the engineering battle taking place beneath their feet. But nature wasn't finished testing Kansai Airport. In 1995, less than a year after opening, Japan experienced one of its most devastating natural disasters. The Great Hanshin earthquake, often called the Kobe earthquake, struck the region. Thousands lost their lives. Infrastructure across the area suffered severe damage. Many feared the airport's artificial island would be devastated. Instead, something remarkable happened. Kansai Airport survived with surprisingly little damage. The engineering systems performed exactly as intended. For many experts, it was proof that the project had achieved something extraordinary. But another threat would eventually prove even more dangerous: typhoons. Located in Osaka Bay, the airport sits directly in the path of powerful storms.